So in this video, we'll look at how we can organize a garden shed. So mine, probably like yours, is completely full of stuff. It's a right mess that you can't even put your feet inside it properly. So you got a whole lot of tools hanging around in that corner with the lawnmower, finishers, and a whole lot of rubbish lying everywhere. If you need to get something, it's pretty tough right now. So my plan is to organize this garden shed, and I'm tackling 5 different projects in this. One, reinforcing the shelf in the back, and then creating a new shelf, a tool rack, and a crate to hold long objects, and even a small bench for the lawnmower. So stick on and let's see how we go with it. The first project is reinforcing this long shelf in the back. Now this is just an old wardrobe door that I just placed on a few offcut of timber to form like a shelf. But you can see it's sagging, and it's sagging because of the weight. So for that I have to create a rail which will hold the door so that you can keep heavier items on the shelf. Now I'm just using offcuts of 2x2s from other projects, and I'm recycling a whole lot of material in this project. I haven't bought any new sheet of plywood or timber for this. Now here you're seeing me make a half lap joint. So what I'm trying to do is use shorter pieces of 2x2s, use half lap joint and make them longer, 1.8 meter long rails. And with this joint you can see it's pretty strong, that even when you toast around it still keeps its shape. Now in the back of the shelf I've cut a few timber and I'm going to use it as supports to hold the shelf in place. And that's the shelf, or rather the wardrobe door. So with this I'm screwing in rails to hold the top shelf, and it's a bit long for the door, so you can see me struggling to try and get it inside, but somehow I did manage to get it in. And now you see me cutting out legs with this Evolution saw. Now Evolution was kind enough to send me the saw, so you will be seeing that in the upcoming videos, and there will also be a dedicated video just for that coming up on my channel shortly. So what you see me here is drill pilot holes where I can screw the legs onto the floor of the garden shed. So the basic principle in this is just pre-drill the holes, drive in the screws, and that's about it. So once the whole rail assembly has been done solidly, I can just move aside and now move the shelf onto it and just screw it in place. That the first shelf is done, and for the second shelf it's just the same thing. That is, I put the rails on top, pre-drilled it and screwed it in place, and once that is done I move the shelf onto the top of it and then just drill through it. Now I did all this on a working day, so it was pretty late by the time I reached home, but I figured out I'd rather do all the smaller works during this time rather than waste the weekend on it. And anyway, this long shelf is now reinforced and I can get along and move all the items back onto the top of it. And now on to the second part, that is building a new 3-tier shelf. So I picked up one of the worst 2x4 timber which I have lying around, which has got a lot of cracks and all that, and the plan is to rip them all into 2x2s around 1.5 meter long. So I used the table saw to cut everything to rough length, and then with a fence set at 2 inches I started cutting it all into the right shape. Next I reused a whole lot of pallets as a side rails to hold the shelves in place. So I cut them all into rough length on the table saw and then chopped them to the exact length using the miter saw. Gang cutting the timber together is guaranteed to give you the same length in each and every piece. So next I used the straight edge of my level to hold the legs in place. So I kept a pair of legs over here and then kept the short rails on top of it and marked it at 50, 100 and 140. And then using a speed square I just got an accurate line on which the rail should rest on, and I transferred that to both the sides. And here is just pre-drill and screw it in. Now to make sure that you have exact spacing between the rails as you go up, I created a small template out of another spare wood so that when you hold it all up together, the length should be the same from the first shelf all the way to the second and then to the third shelf. This will ensure that you get a very accurate spacing between the two legs all across the length of it. Now you can see that I just flipped it all across and used a clamp on one side to hold it and pre-drilled and screwed in the longer rails to form the back support. And for the front rails I did something similar, but I just stood it up on its leg, used clamps to temporarily hold it, and then pre-drilled and screwed it in place. Here you can see the frame structure, so it is pretty long and deep, which should be plenty enough to hold stuff in it. Now for the actual shelves, again I'm recycling or reusing old furniture. So it's a mixture of MDF, chipboard and hardboard. So using my track saw, I cut them all into shape. With a track saw, it's pretty easy to do all this, that you just mark the line where you want the length to be and then you just run the saw through it. With a jigsaw, I just cut the corners so that you could place the shelf on the rails directly. Next, I used my handheld router and routed off all the sharp edges, including the legs. And then I used a sander with 80 grit and gave it a full run through. And next I took the shelf and pre-drilled holes on the sides and just screwed it in place. So after putting in one shelf, I noticed it's going to start getting heavier, so I moved it all into the shed and then screwed in all the other shelves. And with that shelf is also done. You could customize your shelf to hold other stuff on it. Like in this case, I just drilled in 2 screws to hold in this whole galvanized outdoor wire. So if I place all my hand tools end to end, they are around 2.7 meter long, and the usable side of my shed is only 1.4 meters. So the plan is to make a tool rack, which is this third project, so that I can batch up as many as possible, the tools which are similar in nature, and it should be easy to access as well. The plan is to get a good thick material so that the tools can rest on it without sagging. So what I'm doing here is ripping a hardboard board into 3 separate pieces, and when you screw them all up, it's really thick. It's around like 2 inches thick. And the whole tool rack is around 6.5 inches in depth. So using a hole saw, I drilled in the holes in which the handles of the spade and all that kind of tools will sit in. And then I used a jigsaw and cut the line from the outside edge onto the hole created by the hole saw. And now I'm just running it again on the table saw to get all the edges in line and flush. Now for the frame on which this tool rack will sit, I'm just using 2x2s and I've just chopped them to length. And I also used an offcut of a 2x4 to make this 45-degree bevel supports. The entire frame is going to be assembled by either pocket screws or straight butt joints. And this is the assembly where you just pre-drill and then countersink the holes and then drive in the screws. all the exposed edges gets a bit of sanding with the 80 grit. Now I like to reuse stuff, so the holes which were cut out by using the hole saw, I'm planning to create a kind of like a stop on the front of it. So I used a set of washers and a screw, and you can see it just screwed in like a centimeter or so away from the edge. So with this you will have an open position and a closed position. Now back in the shed, as I mentioned before, I used the pocket screws and I just screwed it onto the frame of the shed. So this will give it the vertical support, and then for the horizontal support I screwed in from the side onto the bottom part of the frame. And then I took the tool rack and placed it on top and then screwed it from the top. There were plenty of screws in this actually. I think I used around 20 or so, so it should be fine. If it sags later, I'll probably go and fix it. There you can see me just putting in all my spades and shovels and forks and all that stuff in here. And the stop works. I mean, it does hold it in place, and I'm pretty pleased with it. And now for the other bits. So this is a bicycle hanger where you can hang your bicycles on the wall. So some of the garden tools, right, they are sharp and they're pointy, so it's always good to keep the sharp edges away from your body. So I decided to use this bicycle holder thing to keep this shears. So this is what I mean. This is my son's bicycle in the other garage where it's fixed onto the wall. And for the remaining shears and loppers and all that, I just use normal hooks which you can get. So just pre-drill it and drive in the hooks, and every hook is customized to the actual tool that I'm using, so you could do something similar if you want to. And to hold the bottom bit in place, I used a strip of plywood so that the legs doesn't slide out. And with that, this tool rack build is also complete. And now let's work on the fourth project. In this we are planning to create a crate to hold all the long handled tools like your brooms and your rakes and your leaf blower and all that stuff. So I'm just using offcuts of older projects and recycled material, so the colors will not match and the length may also not be the same. And then I did a dry fit to make sure that it all works fine. After I did that, I cut out a few rails from scrap pallet wood. Then using pocket hole screws and some wood glue, I attach the rails to the legs so that the legs are rigid. And that's about it for this project. It's a pretty simple stand. And next what you see me here is putting it back in the shed along with the lawnmower and the scarifier on top. And that's it. So let's take a final tour on how everything is organized. So I got my wheelbarrow and a whole lot of barbecue things related in the corner. The toy boxes, the reels, the finishes and whole lot. And the top I again got a box of wood and decking spares and ice cooler and again some stuff which I found from different places. And on this rack I got the coaches, screw bolts and the whole lot and a wood, the evolution saw, a whole lot of extra timber. And then you got the long rack over there which contains all my brooms, tampers, leaf blower and all that. And then on this side you got the lawnmower and the scarifier on the bench. And this is the tool rack which you saw earlier, which has got a whole lot of spades and all the other shears, bypass loppers and all that. And that's it guys. I hope some part of this was useful, if not entertaining. And thanks for watching. A quick subscriber update is that I crossed 1000 subscribers after a year or 2 years on YouTube, and I'm pretty much surprised who would like to watch my channel, but if you are one of those people, thank you so much. So cheers guys, and hope you have a great time. Bye.